KE0JWK. Today we're going to look at modeling a ground plane antenna in 4NEC2. It's not a full-fledged tutorial, but I just want to give you a taste of what it takes to model a fairly simple ground plane. We're going to do this for the 2 meter band. I'm going to center it for 147 megahertz. The There are some other modeling programs out there. All work pretty similar. I prefer 4NEC2. I did start out with the free version of Easy NEC. Be aware if you do that, it limits the number of wire segments that you can have, which makes a difference in the accuracy. But I was glad I started with it because it made transitioning into or learning 4NEC2 a lot easier for me. If you're going to do any modeling and you don't do it often, or you just are starting out, I highly recommend you do a web search and find the Beginner's Guide to Antenna Modeling, Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 by L.B. Siebeck, W4RNL. The at least give a good read to Part 1. And it'll explain a lot of the little intricacies of modeling to you that otherwise you gotta learn the hard way. I was so glad I was already modeling when I ran across that series of articles, and they just totally changed it for me. It made it so much easier to understand. So anyway, this is going to be cut into a few different segments, just because it's easier for me to record and easier for you to watch that way. So the first one is going to be manual entry on the editor screen. As you can see, this is just some of the information you can get from your modeling program. I'm going to close that out. This is the main screen. The 4NEC2 has 4 different editors you can use. You can just use Notepad. You can use the old style NEC editor, which fills out the data cards for you. You can use a geometry edit where you actually draw your antenna out. I've used it before. One of the main drawbacks, and we'll get into that in one of the other videos in the series, is using variables. The geometry editor won't let you use any variables. You can go back and change it in one of the other editors later, but to me, I find it to be easier just to use the NEC editor new. Their new editor is really nice. It's kind of like filling out a spreadsheet, and it's my preference, but you try them all and see what works best for you. But that's what we'll be using here is the editor new. So on the main screen, you got a bunch of little picture boxes here, and they all do different things. The one that looks like a book with a pencil, brings up your editor for you. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments. Because I'm going to run through this fairly fast, but I'll be happy to try to answer any questions I can. And if I don't have the answer, maybe I can refer you to where to find it. So the frequency and ground screen, you fill in the frequency that you're building for. I'm using a real ground. It gives you different choices. Just drop down the menu. If whatever you put in here will affect with what you see down here, I'm using moderate. We can switch it to average. That it changes the conductivity of the ground and the dielectric constant of the ground. Just kind of make a judgment call on what you want to use. I'm going to change this back to medium hills and forest, which is what I generally use for my location. On the source screen, got some different things you can look at and fill in here. For this antenna, we're just going to be using a voltage source. I know it's going to be on wire 1, which is going to be tag 1 when we get over to the geometry screen here. And we're going to put it on the second segment. On a dipole, a truly balanced antenna, I find it works best and most accurate if you put your source on a separate little short wire and you want to put it on the center segment. So 1, 2, 3, it would be 2. In this case, I'm not using a separate short wire, although I easily could, and I have on verticals before, when I'm going to let the program tweak the antenna for me. That way, that source always is in exactly the same spot. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Um, Here's your geometry screen. This is where you put in all your coordinates. Works on an X, Y, Z. Y and X are on the horizontal plane to the Earth, and Z is your vertical plane. Um, One thing I suggest, if you have a hard time visualizing things or you're just starting, grab a paper and pencil and make a sketch of the antenna you want to build, or use maybe like the paint program. I threw one together here for you. This shows a very rough sketch of a dipole, ground plane antenna. I'm sorry, dipole. It shows a very rough sketch of a ground plane. I know I'm doing 147, so I want the radiator 19 inches long. I just made some notes on here. I want the radials about 19 inches long. I want the base of the antenna about 4 meters above ground level, which is almost 158 inches, which is what I'm going to use. I've got a neat little calculator here. I don't know what version of Windows this is, but it comes with it. And it'll do regular calculator, or it'll do converters. I'm using the length converter. And so I just set it on, I wanted it about 4 meters off of the ground. Comes up to 157.4803, which is close enough to 158 inches for me. So let's get that out of the way. Let's get the paint program out of the way. But a sketch will really help you if you have a hard time visualizing things. So here we are. So wire number 1 up here, which I marked as tag 1. The segments you want to keep don't necessarily need the same number of segments on each wire. And a wire in a modeling program, it doesn't matter. It could be tubing, copper, aluminum, whatever. You can define that elsewhere in the program. But we're going to divide it into segments. It works best if you have odd number of segments, and the size of the segments on each wire approximately the same length. You want them to be a minimum of 4 times the diameter, not the radius, but the diameter of your wire or tubing, whatever it happens to be. And this will all affect the accuracy. So my radials on this are a little bit longer than my radiator, but it's close enough. I made them all. I used the same number of segments on each. You can get the calculator out and make them closer than that if you want, but this is generally good enough on an antenna like this size. So wire number 1, which is my vertical. Let's put the wire numbers on here so you can see them. Which is the vertical radiator. Is going to be at X1, Y1, X0, Y0, and Z is going to be 158. That's where the antenna starts. N2 is also 0, 0, and I want it 19 inches above 158, so that's 177. Make sure you use the wire radius on here and not the diameter. I accidentally slip every once in a while, and I'll put the diameter in. And it's a real good idea to fill your comments out. You'll think you remember what they are, but when you look at it a couple months from now, you're just gonna have to go back, and it's a pain to figure everything out. I'm bad about not putting comments in, but I'm getting better at it. So if you need to know, if you're using actual wire, there's some calculators online. I like this one. It's at rapidtables.com, and you put in your wire size in US AWG. So a 14 gauge wire, hit calculate, gives you the diameter. Just divide that in 2 for your radius. Let's go back to 12 where I had it. It's 0808, so divided in 2, it's a 0.0404. But there's some other calculators. I like that one because it gives you a lot of information on the wire if you need it for building inductors or anything. So that's the end of part 1 here. We'll be back if you think this is going to be helpful for you or you like like it, or it's entertaining, or you like laughing at me because I stumble on words a lot, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, pass it on to your friends. The subscribe button, if you do that, you'll get notified the next time I put a video up. Other than that, see you shortly.